there are sort of rules about what you can and can't ask.
Yeah.
The receptionist, best friend when you're recruiting.
Yeah, the retention's increased.
They call it the horn halo effect.
The horn halo effect.
And it was bizarre. She came in one day and he put her desk outside because he said he found her annoying.
Leadership, it can be just like herding cats. Ever tried that before?
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Leadership Herding Cats podcast. I'm Lee, and today we're going to be giving you some actionable things you can put in place to help avoid the nightmare hire. Recruitment can be really, really difficult, and we're going to try and help you today to see how you can avoid that hire. Joining me today is Joe Rolleston from The Progress Shed. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us again today. You were with us a couple of weeks ago, or technically 5 minutes ago, but the episode would have gone out a few weeks ago.
I'd say it's great to be back.
Yeah, exactly. And in that episode, if you haven't listened to it, we discussed why no hire is better than any hire. But today, as we alluded to in that podcast, we're going to give you those actual actionable tips on what you can do. We'll just recover about yourself, Joe. So you run the Progress Shed, which is recruitment specifically for which sectors again?
Financial services, legal and planning.
Yeah. And you've been in recruitment, you say, for over 25 years?
Yes, over 25 years, both agency and as an in-house recruiter, and recruited thousands over my time, but now sort of very technical. Yeah. But done everything you can think of in recruitment. And
I suppose would you say the basics of trying to avoid the bad hire have changed much, or is it the fundamentals still the same?
The fundamentals are still very much in place there.
Yeah. Bit more important if there's a skill shortage, though, I suppose. If there's
yes, and in this candidate-led market, it makes it really difficult. Yeah. So, take your time, do your checks. Yeah.
So, as a recruiter, do you just throw any candidate at your clients, or what do you do?
They seem to think it's easy, but it's not. No, it's very involved. So it's a lot of hunting, screening, lot of interviewing, a lot of selecting. Really, that whole deselection process is a lot bigger than people realise. And if you're doing your own recruitment yourselves, deselection is really important. And if you're not receiving enough people coming through, still do it, because you don't want that bad hire, which is what we covered last time. So it is the deselection process.
Absolutely. Yeah, I suppose whether you're doing it yourself or you are outsourcing, like you say, it's that structure in the beginning as much as the next stage that I find especially is really, really important. I mean, in our business, in the cleaning industry, everything's rush. Everything's got to be quick because we can't miss cleans. We've got to solve that problem. And when you're covering lots of different sites, you've always got something that you've got to try and cover. So it can be tempting to rush things along, can't it? But how important do you think it is to have that sort of set process to run with?
It's really important, because if you miss something, it can really cost your business a lot of money. Yeah. And we said the wrong hires. So you need to do your background checks. You need to ask those right questions. I mean, years ago, you used to do an application form as well as a CV, and you used to make people do those additional hurdles. So I think what's changed now is that it is a lot quicker. But think about that application form. What do you need to find out? And you can do it on on an online interview now. But make sure you're not rushing it, and make sure you're doing those checks. I mean, I still say you need to do those references, and you need to have those questions that we spoke about. Have your set questions that you ask, and then if there's any alarm bells going, why has this person changed jobs so often? Dig a bit deeper. And we said before, dig into social media as well to get sort of a bit of a profile of the person you're looking to take on into your business.
Yeah, because we have the set sort of process. Once we've gone through that selection, and I said in the last podcast, our CVs that we receive are quite often more just for contact information than anything else. So we always start with a telephone call, and we literally ring everyone every single applicant we get, we ring. And I feel, I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel recruitment has definitely got more it involves a lot more legwork nowadays. I think you have to do a lot more of that to find them. I don't think they just fall in your lap anymore, do they? So we literally phone everyone, and we'll deselect a number of people from that process, and then we go into a video interview. And again, we've got a set standard sort of questions from there, but we're highlighting the points, and as you said, sort of digging deeper into the question marks. We'll quite often repeat questions but phrase them in a different way, and then we'll always do a face-to-face as well. And actually we still do an application form at that point, so we make sure that they fill an application form in then. But even after we've done a face-to-face, we'll do a trial shift, and we make sure everyone that starts here or is looking to start here goes out on a trial shift, whether it's a whole day, half a day, whatever it might be, depending on the role. But that for us, I mean, ever since we've put that in place, we've seen not just the applicants better anyway, or rather, sorry, the appointments better anyway, the retention's increased. And I think it's just completely helped. It's a balancing act between speed and getting all that in. Yeah. But I think that's fundamental.
I think it really, you've got to get those, your process in place. And I think, in your industry, having that trial session is really good and very interesting. Our local pub, we all know there's a shortage in hospitality staff, put a thing on Facebook for a trial day. And my daughter went along, absolutely loved it. Seemed to be the only one that couldn't drop, didn't drop plates and could smile and speak to the customers. And she got a job. She's now a supervisor there, which is great, But they had to, doing that, just taking people on face value. You do need to dive deeper. And I mean, obviously, what I do is quite specialised. But there's absolutely no way I would put a candidate in front of a client unless I've ideally Zoomed them and online, but at least a phone call. And I speak to a lot of people in their cars and lunch breaks, so that's quite normal now. So, but yes, it is. You do need, because that extra 5 minutes can save you from making a bad hire.
It can, and I know Kim will relate to you there. Our Kim, our people person, she'll relate to you there about where she speaks to people and lunch breaks and this and that and everything. So, but I suppose it does beg the question, even if you've got that process, if you feel you're going to lose someone, and I think you said in the last podcast that you've got, you've had applicants maybe sit on something for too long and you've had to say to them, but they're already got an offer from elsewhere. Should you rush that process? Should you just speed it up rather than losing someone?
I think what's really important is that you need to ask them, what else are you applying for? What stage are you at? Keep me, that's what I do. Let me know, because I will speed up, put some pressure on to get some answers for you. But you need to say, where else are you on interview? When you're expecting to hear back from them, how does this role compare to others? So it's questions again. Ask. It's all about the questioning. Find out where else they're on interview and what timescales you're looking at, because they might say, actually, this job's absolutely perfect for me. I'm not looking at anything else. Then you've bought yourself a little bit of time. But please, it's candidate led. Don't sit on CVs. Communicate. Even if you're saying, we're really interested in you. Unfortunately, I can't see you until 2 weeks' time because of annual leave. Where else are you on interview? Let them know, that get them excited that you're excited in them.
That's a really good point, actually. And it even for me, my brain's going thinking, oh, actually, do we ask that? Do we ask, what other positions they're applying for and things like that? Because I'm not sure if we do. I know Kim is very proactive at keeping them in the loop, telling them when we can get them in, and if we can't get them in, why we can't get them in, and things like that. Especially with the trial shifts, because we do have a lot of people sort of a little bit hesitant about that, which actually I feel creates that barrier, and it creates that understanding that we don't just employ anyone, which with some people maybe makes them want to be here more because it means we're serious about it. With other people, it tends to put them off, and it's a case of, well, no, why should I go and do a shift and maybe not want the job or something like that? So,
Can I ask a question from behind the camera?
Yes, of course you can.
Do you think it's a good sign that somebody's only applied for one position, or do you think it's a bad sign?
I always like it, actually. I think, in fact, we've got someone that's starting as a technician soon who has done exactly that. They're changing career completely, but they have, and we'll have been waiting quite a while once they do start. So I always take it as quite a good sign. What do you think?
In my industry,
Yeah,
it's one of those where quite often we approach people and they weren't looking, and they go, actually, it's time for a change, and then they start looking.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, you have people that apply for everything. And then I always say, have you already applied for this company? And ask all those questions. And then I send their CV, and they've already received their CV, and that looks really bad because it makes them look quite desperate.
Yeah.
So, if you are job seeking, my top tip would be keep a record of where your CV's been and who you've spoken to, because you don't want your CV ending up in if someone applied to you twice, you'd be scratching your head.
I was just about to say, well, that's kind of where that's why I like the fact they only apply if they're only applying for us, because we are most certainly in the camp where people will apply for everything multiple times. I mean, we will, if we've got 2 or 3 part-time positions on, they'll be applying for every single one. Doesn't matter if they're completely different locations, they'll be in every single one. And then we'll quite often make that initial phone call and we'll say, you've applied for a position. Oh, which one's that? I think that's probably the best phrase. Oh, which one's that? Can you tell me a bit about the job? Well, I thought you would have known about the job. You would know about the, where it is, how many hours it is, what days of the week it is, and things like that. It's
I mean, sometimes I have those sort of confused conversations where people apply for a role through us, but they don't always understand that we are an agency. Yeah. And they think that I'm the employer, but I mean, it's always very clear. But I get that. Sorry, which role was that? Yeah.
And to a degree, I understand it. And I suppose, especially with people that have been maybe made redundant, or they know things are coming to it, they get a little bit more in a hurry to get into a role, don't they? But I think it's really important to make sure that you're a bit more selective of what you're applying for, really.
And I really hate it when I hear those, we've already received the CV multiple times, and it's like, then I go back, and then the deeper questions: what's going on? Why are you applying? Why are you so desperate to leave? Or, I mean, if you've been made redundant, I understand. And it really is, one of my key tips is you have to find out why they've left somewhere, because it really will give you that information that you need. And it can be lack of career progression, or I've heard lots of things, and sometimes there's really I've been there 5 years, it's time for a change, and then it's like, what do you like, what don't you like, and just those, call it the sort of the funnel technique, where you're just sort of going in to find out really the answers that you need to find.
And that kind of triggers a question for me, because I do feel that's absolutely fundamental, is to find out why they're leaving another position, because obviously no one wants someone that's job hopping all the time. You want someone for a reasonable length of time anyway. But how do you really sort of dig deep and find out the real reason why? Do you just take what they're saying on face value? How do you try and sort of dig a little bit deeper?
You said it there. Why?
Yeah.
Why? Keep questioning. Why was that?
Yeah.
How did that come about? Why? Yeah. So it's and you just and quite often say, sorry, that doesn't quite make sense to me. Could you just go into a bit more detail? So just to find out. I mean, there's people do move, people do progress in their careers, but it's always got to be the right reason. And don't sometimes if you get a CV in front of you and it's they've been a few months here, a few months there, speak to them. They might have just been temporary contracts, because people don't always put that they're temporary contracts, and you're dismissing somebody who's been doing temporary contracts, and sometimes you get stuck in that temporary contract. And they're good because you see, they've been back there, they've been back there, they've been back there. I was asked back there, and it shows, yes, but it's...
Yeah, we get that all the time in our industry. Obviously, people that will clean will go and work for agencies and things like that, and quite often they'll get more money if they're agency working and things. So, yeah, like you say, they get in loops and they start putting the names on because they want to fill their CV out, but it just looks like they've got really short periods in different places.
Like we said in the previous podcast, that it's sometimes that's the tip of the iceberg, and then we've got to look further deeper into the social media and that side. Yeah. So it's...
And how do you react, and how do you feel about someone that starts running down where they're leaving, their previous employer, where they're leaving or where they've left from?
I ask more questions. Yeah. Because sometimes, well, it's not professional, is it?
No, and that's why I ask, because I don't like it. I don't like it at all. It's a bit of a sales tactic for some people, whether they're selling themselves or selling a service. But I just really don't like it. And I think even if it's a case of you kind of explain what the situation is, or you just say kind of, oh, well, I wasn't very happy with how I was treated or something. I think that's a little bit different than actually running them down. Yeah.
And I wouldn't put them probably in front of my client.
No.
Because if you're bad mouthing about a previous employer, they would then do that to my client in future. So, I mean, sometimes there are really good reasons, but you need to be professional about it. But sometimes it's good, equally, it's good to flush it out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and again, I think ultimately it is that digging, isn't it? It's not sticking to a list of questions. Yeah. It's not being frightened of repeating a question in a different way and things like that.
And as we said at the beginning of the podcast, deselection. You're doing a deselection process. Oh, so you didn't get on with your boss. Why was that? Was there anything specific you didn't like? Yeah. Just don't. You need to be careful with your questioning. That there are sort of rules about what you can and can't ask. Yeah. You don't want to be discriminatory, but you need to. Sometimes you just need to say why. Yeah. Can you? And that I say that a lot. Could you explain that further? I don't understand. Mm.
Yeah, and then that's a good way to bracket it as well, isn't it? It's like, I don't understand. Can you just explain that a bit more? I think
just run that by me again.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And sometimes you go, they did what?
Oh yeah. And with that sort of question and with that interview process, what would you suggest is the best way to go with it? Is it a gut feeling thing? How do you make that final decision of whether you progress them to put in front of them your clients, or whether or not you would recruit them?
They call it the horn halo effect.
The horn halo effect.
So the halo is when you immediately like them, and the horn is like, oh, I'm not sure about that.
I've not heard that one before.
I would say, you don't have to employ everybody you like.
Yes.
But you do need to think about the team fit and how they're going to fit in with the team. So when I've had PAs in the past, they're really, really organised and efficient, which clashes with me a bit.
Yeah.
But that's the person I need.
Yeah.
So don't always go, don't go for a mini me. Don't recruit the same as you. It's what's right for the team, and you have to sometimes park that horn halo effect. Yeah. I've been working with a VA, and I need that really organised. You need to do this, and this, which I find annoying.
Yeah.
But they're absolutely perfect person for what I need.
Yeah.
Because you don't want another you.
No. And I think, I couldn't have two of me.
Yeah. No such thing, Lee.
No, there's definitely not. No, and I think one of the things that we've done to try and, I love that phrase, horn and halo effect. I think one of the things that we've done to try and combat that as well is putting a scoring system in place, because we've had one of our previous colleagues that was here that did a lot of the interviewing and everything like that. One of the nicest people you would ever meet, and basically loved everyone, could never see any bad in anyone, which I think is brilliant. I'd love to be that way. Unfortunately, I'm not. But that didn't always bode well for an interview process. So with certain positions we would interview together and we would make joint decisions. And because we would be so opposites, we went scoring. And so we had just 5 sets of criteria, fit for the team being one of them, skill set, that sort of thing. And we would, as we're doing the interview, we boil it down to a score for each one of those. And we know exactly what the final score had to be for us to consider them, basically. And I find that really effective. I won't say we use it all the time. I'm actually quite a believer in sometimes going for the gut feeling. But I do find that can be really helpful to make those really awkward decisions, or if you're just torn and you can't go with it.
Yeah, I think it's really useful to have a key set of questions that you ask.
Yeah.
And be prepared to sometimes go off the plan if you need to. But I used to recruit 300 seasonal staff, so I had criteria. I'd have my little score sheet, but then be prepared to be a bit flex as well. But yeah, you've got to have a score, because it's like, well, I like them, and you need to have your notes and a crib. I call it my crib sheet. So I have my standard questions that I ask, and then you sometimes you go a bit deeper.
Yeah. And if you're doing, like we've said, you've got that multiple sort of interview process, would you advise, if it's different people doing that, I suppose that's one question, would you advise involving different people in that process?
Yes, because it's always good to have somebody to bounce ideas off.
Yeah.
Really, really good idea to do that. One thing I really don't like, and some people go, I love it, I hate the group interviews. Yeah, because I think you can fall, you get the loudest, and it may be that really quiet, steady person that doesn't speak is the person that you need in your team. So, sometimes group interviews are great, but always, if you're doing the group interview, you make sure you get the one-to-one interview in. And it's always good to have somebody to bounce ideas off. And I used to, when I recruited all these seasonal staff, I used to ask the receptionist.
Yeah.
What were they like when they came in? Were they polite? Were they nervous? How did they come? How did they come across to you? Because I couldn't have, with that many staff, I couldn't have somebody sitting in with me. But with the senior key staffs, the managers, the head chefs, I used to get the operations manager to come and sit with me. But really, watch what they're like when they come in.
Yeah.
Are they nice to the team? Are they polite? Are they chatty? The receptionist, best friend when you're recruiting.
Yeah, I know. It's more difficult here now because we don't have the waiting area in our main office, but we used to do the same. We used to have that sort of seating point when they came in. They'd sit there, and I'm afraid I was one of those not very nice people that would leave them sat for 5-10 minutes before the interview, because you'd find out if they would open up, how they would treat anyone in the office, whether they'd speak. Because it also comes down to that kind of leads me on to things like, it's not just their answers that you're looking for, is it? You're looking for their body language. You're looking for how they react, which is, to me, is why face-to-face is so important. Yeah.
And you've got to look out for that. Is that just their interview, interview technique? Is that their interview? Yeah. Are they saying what they think you want to say?
Yeah, because the person that interviews really well isn't always the right person for the job, is it?
No.
And I think these days, maybe I'm just not very trusting, but these days I actually worry about the person that doesn't get nervous, the person that interviews perfect.
Yeah.
Before we dive too deep into this week's podcast, I want to tell you a little bit about our sponsors, which is Vapor Clean Commercial Cleaning Services. Vapor Clean provides commercial contract cleaning throughout the Southwest. If you run a business with premises that need cleaning on a daily basis, then we can provide that service for you regularly, sufficiently, and consistently to the highest standard. We provide trained, professional operatives that are audited and supported the right way, making sure you have the highest standards all year round. So if you want to know more, get in touch. But for now, back to the podcast.
And we were talking today, we were nervous about doing this podcast because it's important.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's exactly that, isn't it? If it's important to you, if you really want whatever you're doing, if you're applying for that job, you really want it, you'd expect that person to get nervous.
I always say to candidates, if you're feeling really nervous, say, "Gosh, I'm feeling really nervous."
Yes.
And as soon as you say it breaks it. And I remember I once interviewed somebody that was so nervous, and I said, "Look, I can see you're really nervous. I'm just going to ask you some questions. Do you want to go and fresh out?" If you see the candidate's really nervous, then talk about it. Because as soon as you say, "Oh yes, I am," it kind of clears the air, and it's like, it's fine. I'm just going to ask you about your experience. There's no wrongs or rights, and try and create that environment where they feel comfortable to talk. It's really important.
And just sort of circling back, we said about sort of involving other people into that interview process. Do you feel it's better to share notes or keep notes to yourself so they've got a fresh perspective?
Sort of share notes.
As in, so if you've done the first interview, for example, and then you have someone else do the second interview, would you share your notes, your answers that they've given you from that across? No. You don't
I think it's there because then you're imparting your opinion on them before they even start. So I've been recruiting for a really quite a senior role with a client, and one of them interviewed, and then she goes, "We're going to go into second interview, but I want to know his opinion, so I'm not going to give him any information before, because otherwise you're almost guiding them to the answers that you want." Because she goes, "I've got a preferred I've got one of the candidates preferred, but I think the other one's going to be better for the job." So it is quite interesting. And then I used to just bring in somebody for the last 5 minutes, because everyone's got people are busy. So if you're interviewing and you get to the end, you're like, "I'm not sure," then you can just say, "Oh, I want to bring in David to come and meet you. It's just really nice for you to meet somebody else from the team." And then already prime David that it's going to be, look, if I bring you in, it means I'm could do with a second opinion. So yeah,
that's a good idea as well. And I must admit we've tried through the years, we've done both ways of sharing notes, not sharing notes, and for exactly the reason you've just said. I would say, "I'm not going to tell you because I'm not sure." But then in the other instance, there's been something that's just niggled at me. There's been a scenario or an answer they've given me that just hasn't. I don't feel like I've got the truth or right to the bottom of it.
But if there's something specific, you could say, "Can you question around this?" Because their answer just confused me. And but if you give all your notes and saying, "Well, so.
And one thing that sort of a lot of people might question as well is whether or not you should avoid someone that has been fired from a previous position. What's your sort of perspective on that one?
I would investigate. I would have a very strong probationary period and ability to check in. That's really important, because I heard one the other day, and it was bizarre. She came in one day and he put her desk outside because he said he found her annoying.
I mean, I've been tempted to do that once or twice, but I haven't actually done it.
So she walked out without giving any notice, and I mean that should have gone to tribunal. But sometimes I think sometimes you do need to give people a chance. Sometimes it is a clash of personalities, but you've got to make sure that the personalities in your team. So it is a gamble. But I would get references previously. I would look at how long have they job hopped a lot. There's lots of factors. It's not if they've been fired and they've been 2 months here and 2 months here and 2 months here, and it hasn't been temporary work, then there'd be question marks. But I've seen CVs where someone's been somewhere for 15 years, joined another company, hasn't worked out, they've been asked to leave, but it doesn't mean that it was maybe the wrong role. So there's no black and white sort of yes no. It's a maybe.
I agree, and I think for me the one thing that I always look for is openness and truth from the applicant. So the one person that always springs to mind for me, I actually had someone apply for a position here quite some time ago now. was before we did application forms, which is one of the reasons we do application forms now, actually, because there's a section on the application forms about any sort of criminal record. And for me, a criminal record isn't always a definite no, depending on the position, location, and obviously what that criminal record is. But they have to be open about it. So if they put it on the form and they're open about it, then we'll talk about it and we can make a decision from there. If they don't put it on the form and then it comes up in a DBS check, obviously, sorry, you're gone, you lied. Simple as that. But this particular person, we didn't have the application form, so we didn't know, but we'd done the phone interview. We didn't do video then, but we did phone, and we did a face-to-face here in the office. And this person interviewed absolutely brilliantly. Was nervous, but still gave good answers. Everything else had a long-standing history of where she was, but actually turned out to have a history with drugs, and did have a criminal history for a criminal record. Sorry, for theft, which was relating to the drugs, which is why she was fired from the position. Now, towards the end of that interview, basically that applicant turned around to me and said, before I leave, I do have to explain this to you and everything else, and run all the way through it. And we had 2 applicants at the time, that we were kind of 50-50 between each of them, and that person happened to be one of them. And I made the decision to give them the chance and bring them on. I mean, the positions they were going into was a team position, so it wasn't lone working or anything like that in the early days, and all that sort of thing. So we'd put everything in place. We'd also asked the client, we declared it to the client just before, just to make sure that they were happy, and they were as well, as long as we put everything in place as well. And that person actually turned out to be one of the best employees we ever had. Simple as that.
Yeah.
So I do think you have to make your own mind up. You have to be careful. You've got to make a decision. But I do think ultimately it comes back to the same thing, doesn't it? Digging deep, finding out, making sure that you are comfortable that you're getting everything from the applicant and the full story. But also that, for me, they align with your values. And although that was, I would class that as a major hiccup, but it was a hiccup in character that they then managed to turn around, and I mean, it worked out fantastic. Being for us. Honest. Yeah, exactly, which is quite a big.
But throughout, you've got to dig. You've got to ask those questions to get the answers.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier about. I'm going to ask if this makes me a horrible person. You mentioned earlier about trying to put them at ease, make them comfortable in an interview as well, and everything like that. I sometimes take the opposite tactic, and I sometimes get awkward, and I try and make them feel a little bit nervous and make them squirm a little bit with some of my answers, and dig a little bit deeper. Have you ever sort of heard of that? Do you think that's horrible? Do you see my reasons behind that?
Well, the operations manager that used to come in when we were doing the high levels, or the hotel managers and that, used to be quite sort of confrontational, because that was almost like a role play of what's happening. That would happen in their work. You can go either way. I want to get as much information out of this person, so I kind of want them on side. But when you're at second stage interview, you do need to be a bit firmer, and that, because you've got that information already. So and depending on the role, you want to see how they're going to perform. How do they perform under pressure? Yeah. So,
and I'd quite often use that tactic is for, as I was saying earlier, my previous colleague that was maybe a lot nicer than me, or fluffy, as I would say, certainly much more fluffy, and everyone warmed to them straight away. I would then come in at the next stage interview more often than not, and that's when I'd sort of get it a little bit more awkward, make them a little bit more nervous, and dig a bit deeper. And probably our technician team leader Lee would absolutely contest to this, because he's quite open and honest. When he started here a couple of weeks in, he said to me, "You made me really nervous in that interview," but I did it purposely for him, because again, he's such a nice guy that actually everything that I was being told about him, I sat there to myself and thought to myself, this almost feels too good to be true. I want to make sure that this is the scenario. And I think I got some better clarity to where he was, because actually he was too nice to say why he was leaving where he was.
Yeah. So I kind of start off nice because you want to get them relaxed, and then you go in for the more direct questioning.
Yeah.
So it'd be like, if I phoned up your manager, what would they say are your weak points? And that's a great question.
Yeah.
And people often go, well, that's a good question. I said, and the answer is,
yeah.
If you had an appraisal, what would be brought up as your weaknesses? Because when you ask people what's your weaknesses and what's your strengths, it's one of those, it's such a standard interview question. But it's like, if I what was brought up in your appraisal as something to work on, and it's back to that questioning.
I was going to say, and that's a really good point, actually, because I was just about to say to you, so what do you do with those people that sit there and go, oh, I don't know, actually. Oh, that's a really hard one. Because you get that quite a lot, and they never actually answer the question.
So I go, you're perfect then.
Yeah. I mean, I've done that as well. I didn't know that. But it is, I suppose, it's like you say, it's rephrasing that question again, isn't it? It like you say, as in, what was brought up in your appraisal is a good way of doing it.
Yeah.
So, and what type of things do you look for? We said earlier about potentially looking for sort of body language and the way they behave and things like that. What are a big standout of, oh, I don't like that, or I do like that? Is there anything in particular?
Well, these days, because of where I am, it's all done online. But I look for that non-cluttered background, smart in appearance, that they've made an effort. First impressions still count.
Yes. Yeah.
So whether you're arriving in an office, you don't have to necessarily wear a suit, but be smartly presented the best you can.
Yeah.
And if it's online, we don't get rid of the clutter.
Yeah.
You just plain background, you're presentable, not in your pajamas, you've brushed your hair, just that you're taking it seriously. You want people that are taking it seriously, And okay, you're looking for technicians, but they need to come up. Yeah. They're going to be on client sites. They need to be smart and presentable.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, like you said earlier, they're representing your company, aren't they? No matter what, wherever they are, what position they're in, they're still representing your company. And I don't know if it's just me, but something as simple as taking their cup out or asking if they can take their cup out at the end of the interview, that to me shows the right sort of attitude as well. And maybe it's the industry I'm in, but pushing their chair in, picking the cup up, anything along those lines, I think is quite a good sign as well, really.
Yeah.
And maybe this is, whether or not this is applicable to sort of the sectors that you're employing for, but over sort of excessive jargon and things like that, can that be a good thing, a bad thing? How does that sort of pan out for you?
Well, in my industry, there is technical terms. Yeah. So yes, you have to learn them, because if they don't know it, they're not in the industry. So it does have to be technical, because the role, when you're recruiting for a technical role, if someone doesn't know differences between cleaning products, that's jargon, isn't it? But it is important.
Yeah. So,
and I think when people get really technical with the jargon, I'm going to say you're going to have to speak in layman terms. I'm a recruiter, so when they abbreviate too much, I have to pull them back and say, I don't know what you mean, and make them explain. Because sometimes if people are using jargon, they don't know what it is. It shows weaknesses. So,
Yeah. No, and that's what I mean by sort of the excessive jargon. I get it quite a lot, where they'll sort of, in the cleaning industry, the best one that you always get is, oh, I'm OCD, I love cleaning. And that's kind of the favourite phrases that everyone sort of throws at you.
Give me an example.
Exactly that. But to be honest, I mean, I don't really want someone that's OCD, because you're probably going to spend too long cleaning one thing.
Yes. Yes.
And I think, yes, all right, you have to like cleaning, or at least get some satisfaction from it. But how many people really love cleaning that much, and they want to go and...
It's like, I love seeing it all clean and tidy when I've finished. Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the type of things that you kind of want to look at. And it comes down to digging deeper, finding out a bit more and everything else, which I suppose is a good point to wrap up, really, as sort of clarification, is get your processes right, question, question and question again.
Don't be afraid to ask the awkward questions, as long as they're not discriminatory.
Yeah, exactly that. Good point to put that on there as well. So thank you very much for your time, Jo. It's been a pleasure. I've going to come away with some ideas myself and things to put in place. So just let everyone know how they can get hold of you if they need recruitment. Yeah, you'll find us on LinkedIn. Look out for Joanne Rolliston, or give me a call on 0330 566 665. I'm always happy to have a conversation. Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for listening. Hopefully you have found that very useful and you've got some things you can put into practice yourself. If you have, please do give us a like, follow us, or drop a comment if you have any other questions. And we will see you next week. Thank you very much.